So I'm sure many of you by now have noticed that recently there has been an increase in the discussion of UFOs. Now, the sightings of UFOs never did stop or decrease. So why do you suppose so many people are now addressing the topic? At this point in time, I think most people are aware that certain governments around the world probably have several forms of technology that allows them to build vehicles that you and I would call a UFO if we had seen any of them flying around. The president and a group of senators were recently part of a classified briefing by the Pentagon on the Navy's recent UFO sightings. Now, the Navy has been seeing things in the sky and reporting on them for years. That's not new. Briefing the president, I get it. But what about the senators? What is their role in all of this? They are the link to the people. They represent constituents. They inform the people, and they bring in new laws. Now, what if the military people started sighting UFOs, but this time the government can't explain away what's happening? Secrecy may be an issue. So what if we have real extraterrestrial craft flying around, and to cover it up, they decide to tell everyone, don't worry, it's just us. We've been working on those craft for years. You know, folks, it's getting harder and harder for them to hide the truth. There is too much going on right now for them to keep up. So let's get into this, because I do believe some interesting things are going to continue to happen, alongside with our collapsing politics and rumors of war. The earth changes. We have a busy time ahead of us. It's still building up. So MUFON should be celebrating right now. They should be popping bottles. Because I don't know if you all realize this or not, we have just received a disclosure on the existence of UFOs. Not the existence of extraterrestrials, but by the way of the Pentagon, the Intelligence Committee, the President, several senators, and the Navy. They are trying to tell you all with authority. That's why they have this lineup of government officials. They want to make sure that you all know, they know, and have known about the existence of UFOs. So do you understand that this is no longer a conspiracy theory? All these years, people have been waiting for this type of disclosure, and now that it's here, hardly anyone cares. It seems that they were very successful at desensitizing people to this. The question now is, what's next? Now I want to explain something to everyone. Actually, let me put all of this into perspective for you. What is happening now has happened before. Do you know when? A long time ago. Remember? The Sumerians around 4500 BC give us an origin story of mankind. And this story is interesting because it goes along with the last topic I discussed about dragons and giants, and how the land we are walking on is, in theory, the remains of ancient organisms. So their story goes like this. This is from the Nippur tablet. In the beginning, the heavens and the earth were created by Chaos and Tiamat, before the gods. Then the gods were created in the midst of heaven. When these gods came to earth, there was a lot of work to be done, so they labored. They mined for minerals, tended to the land, but at some point, they got tired of the work. So Anu, the god of gods, and his son Enki, along with the help of his half-sister Ninki, decided that they would create man to take over the work. How did they do this? Well, they slaughtered one of their gods, and they took his body and blood and mixed it with clay. And it was from that composition that man would be formed. This created a natural bond between men and the gods. So now you have a being made of flesh and soul. Are you with me so far? Okay. The story of the Anunnaki tells a similar story, except these gods were draconians that came here from Nibiru to genetically engineer humans to be slaves. Now, I'll tell you the same story again. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Yahweh, along with his son, the archangel Michael, or Jesus, along with Lucifer, because he was there in the beginning too, decided to make man in their image. Man was formed out of land, and God blew into him the breath of life. Then woman was created. This is, of course, the story of Adam and Eve. They multiplied, and then some other gods came down to earth and screwed with the genetics of man, giving us the Nephilim, or Raphaim. Want to hear another one? During the Viking Age, in Norse mythology, the first of the gods slayed a giant, turning his body parts into part of the world. Then Odin, along with two other gods, came to the coast of one of the new land masses that was formed. Then they saw two tree trunks that were shaped like a man and woman. So Odin decides to blow into them the breath of life. They were named Ask and Embla. Once again, names that start with A and E. Ancient Hindu texts and the Vedas talk about flying chariots of the gods, the Vimana. Those texts also talk about the dismemberment of the primeval man that is sacrificed to become the place we live on. How many of you know the story of Pengu, the Chinese god whose body became the earth? There are also old Chinese chronicles that talk about flying chariots. Now, because of emperors and kings, we have a distortion in the history or origin story, so we are left with nothing but mythos. The Native Americans also tell stories of people that came down from the sky in vehicles and taught them things, as well as interbreeding with humans. We can see that all over the world. Ancient civilizations are describing very similar occurrences. And what I can gather from all of this is that at some point, humans of the old world were sighting UFOs just like people are today. And back then, people were just as confused as to what they were. But consequently, the beings of those craft came here to interact with humans. If you look at the stories of the Dead Sea Scrolls, where angels or the fallen came to earth and defiled man and the animals, giving birth to a race of giants and abominations, which were supposedly all wiped out, what is to stop them from getting humans to recreate their abominations? What is to stop them from bringing in a new breed of giant? God can restrict them, yes, but what is to stop them from getting man to do their dirty work? Especially with the tech we have today. I have a feeling that we are going to start hearing this acronym UFO a lot more often than before. But at first, it will be all the same old stuff. Old testimonies, declassified documents, things you and I have seen and heard before. We have seen ex-government workers that have come forward to talk about the technologies that were being worked on decades ago. Compartmentalization. You hear them talk about anti-gravity technology that any one engineer or scientist could not figure out. And I'm going to tell you all this now. The small handful of people who run these secret operations, the few who are not compartmentalized, they know how the technology works. They just want people who are more qualified to build this technology for them. The secret is witchcraft. Now, although that may sound unscientific, it is very scientific, and it is the science of these fallen angels. They are the aliens. They're not from Earth. Because if you know anything about cherubim, they come in different forms. Some have wings, some don't. Some are huge, some are small. And we really have no idea of how many there are. But some believe it's in the millions. Thanks to certain texts, like the Book of Enoch, we have a very close idea of how many came down to follow the angels down from Mount Hermon. But we don't know how many fell with Satan. It just says a third. People keep taking paranormal activities, separating them as if they are phenomenal. Ghosts, black-eyed children, werewolves, Bigfoot, UFOs, aliens, demons, poltergeist. Basically anything that could be put into the monster category, that's them. Why do you think these occurrences happen so close in time and location of each other? That's just my theory on all this. The gods of Egypt, Sumeria, ancient China, Japan, India, the ancient gods of the Americas, ancient Greece, are all expected to make a comeback. And they are expected to make a comeback by several super powerful people who absolutely believe in these gods. People are going to see some things that will shock and frighten them almost to death. And these beings will come acting as our saviors. And when people start bowing down to them, they are going to have them by the balls. Let me ask you all a question. If aliens did show up, if they just one day showed up in the sky with a massive fleet of spacecraft, would you trust those beings? Would you trust anyone who made it a priority to hide from you, only to come and try to take care of you all of a sudden? You know, these days when a new UFO is captured on video and released, I don't even bother watching it. Just another bunch of blurry crap. I mean, we get it. We all know what UFOs look like. They're blurry. If it's clear, it's a fake. But anything blurry is definitely a UFO, with aliens inside. Now I'm being facetious, but the real concern is having such technology and using it as a means to dominate other people. This is why world governments don't want everyone to have nukes, because they simply don't trust them. I think Bob Lazar said it best when he said something like, you can't let gravity technology fall into the wrong hands because next it's force field technology, and that would make someone unstoppable. And they would be able to impose their will upon anyone. Now I think, after all these years, they have reached a level of mastery with the technology that they can now use it for practical purposes. You see, folks, they know what's coming. I'm talking about the stuff that is described in ancient scriptures like the Book of Revelation. And all this tech they are working on, the underground bases, the interstellar travel technology, CERN, HARP, they are trying to save themselves. But here's the problem. None of that stuff is going to matter. It may buy them some time, but eventually they will have to face what God has already put into motion. And no flying saucer or underground bunker is going to save them. And if they think they can team up with the devil and fight God as a last-ditched effort, the devil himself knows that's not going to happen. But he has no problem sending you all out to fight for him while he just sits back and laughs at you. It is totally understood that some of you just don't believe in the Holy Scriptures or the majority of these ancient texts. You stand solely on the side of concrete facts and data, and I get it. But guess what? Those who govern us, they do believe in the ancient texts. And everything that they do is based on that. They still worship the dragon, which is probably the oldest of all religious practices. I have other videos where I get more into the technology of these UFO craft. They have to be designed in certain shapes with specific elements. The positioning of the interior components must be properly aligned, and the ritual must be properly executed to complete the spell. I know you're probably laughing. I'm not kidding. Why do you think CERN is set up the way it's set up? The positioning of the buildings, the Shiva statue, Tesla technology, nuclear reactors. You think people just figured that stuff out, don't you? We will see how this all unfolds. Keep your eyes open, folks. Keep yourselves up to date and aware. And don't be fooled. Most people don't know who the devil is because they can't recognize him.
This is rotting, deteriorating, biological part of a body. Now, this is probably the tendinous part or some really fiber. Watch this. This is his head. Now look down here. You see that? Those are reptile scales, or they were shapeshifters that could stabilize in that form? I have no clue. No clue at all. Now, that means you're going from the red, fleshy stuff that is on the outside of your body more in towards your connective tissue, bones, and organs, all the way up to the last thing here, which is limestone, which is really the tendon. Now, sandstone is a sedimentary rock, and it's eroded away skin cells, and that's why you see that silicon is extremely dense in sandstone, and that's because you're 50 times more silicon in your skin.